Jackie, thanks for joining the podcast. Super excited for this. I'm going to lead off with this. You can see the world without quitting your 9 to 5. That is on your website. I want to talk to you. Show me how. I
Absolutely.
cannot
Let's
wait.
get into it. Thank you so much for having
Yes.
me.
I am so excited for this. I love travel. I love talking travel. I love talking travel hacks, which is kind of what we're going to get into today. Traveling with rewards and points, something I've been doing for a few years now, which has allowed me to travel a hell of a lot more. It's not just allowed me to travel, it's encouraged me to travel a lot more and to go to
Absolutely.
places that normally it's like, yeah, I don't really know if I want to pay a few $100s to go do this. So instead, it's like, well, it's points. I've already paid for it. You want to just go here for free? And so many trips I just get to do because of that. And I can't wait to talk to you about this. You are a completely different level than what I'm at. You have a website, Maximizing My PTO. How long have you kind of been in this game, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean, if you take it back all the way to the beginning with like the first credit card that earned points, I want to say I got that in 2018 sounds about right. And that was very much just dipping my toe in the water. In fact, it was a co-branded Southwest credit card. Really used it to get the companion pass and just did
Hmm.
that for a couple years. Like just got very, very comfortable with that, and then from there use that time to learn more and more, and then from there just jumped really deep into all of the travel hacking world. Got a lot more credit cards, got a lot more points, sat in a lot better seats than Southwest economy, and it's really opened the world up for me. Absolutely.
It's funny you started on either the same or similar card than what I started with. I started with the Southwest. I don't know if it was the Premier. I don't know what it was. It was in 2014, I believe. My buddy got married in Cancun, and we're just like, at the time, I didn't have that much money. I'm like, I want to go to his wedding, but God, how can I afford this? And then my friends were like, oh, dude, sign up for the Southwest credit card. You get a bunch of points, you can fly for free. And at the time, it was with AirTran. They'd partnered with AirTran, who's like no longer an airline, or they bought them out or something like that. And so that's how I was like, wow, I flew to Mexico for free. This is amazing. Show me more. And so gradually I started to learn a little more. Like I said, you're a completely different level than what I'm at. So I've dabbled into this, and like I said, it's opened my world quite a bit, and I can't wait to get into this. So you said 2018, you started with Southwest. Great card. I personally still have it. Do you still have that card?
We just closed it this year after 4 years of the companion pass because our lifestyle has shifted, our travel style has shifted, much more international trips, all through. When we got the car, I got the card. I want to say my like senior year of college, and then so it was like just graduating college, just getting a job, not a lot of money to travel or do anything. So it allowed us to like go domestically a lot more. And then during the pandemic, obviously it was really hard to travel internationally. So
Hmm.
it worked really well that we could do all these domestic flights for buy one, get one free with the companion pass. And then after everything reopened during COVID, we've dramatically shifted our travel style to largely lean international, which has meant not as much need for Southwest in particular. So I've kind of shifted my strategy as my life has shifted, as the world has shifted. And I think that's a big part of this game is like being flexible. Not only are things constantly changing with the cards that are being offered, the value of the points, how you can redeem them, where you can redeem them, but also just like the world is changing, your life is changing constantly. So it's a game of flexibility for sure.
Hmm. So people probably heard you say, I was opening cards, many cards, I was getting points. They probably got anxiety like the moment you said that. I'm winning all these cards. They're probably like, oh my God, I can't imagine all these cards and all the fees and all that stuff that comes with it. What do you say to the people who say that? Because me personally, I have multiple cards. I guess you can say like I drew a limit at somewhere, not really necessarily on purpose. Was like I don't know how many cards I really want to open. But to me,
Mhm.
also, it's like if you're not playing the game, you're doing it wrong, right? Like, so what do you say to the people who are like, oh my God, like, why does she have so many cards? It's crazy.
So I think I'll start with anyone interested in doing this game, earning points, things like that. You can only do it if you're financially responsible. So that means like paying your cards off every single month. First of all, first and foremost, if you're not doing that and you're earning interest, you're negating any value you're earning from points. But then on top of that, obviously being mindful of your credit score and things like that. When you open a credit card, your score will dip for a few months. And so that's why the general recommendation is kind of wait every 3 to 6 months minimum to open between opening cards. And that's kind of what I do, minimum. Sometimes I've waited even longer just to let my score bounce back up a little higher if I am kind of going for something. If you're looking to buy a house, looking to buy a car, like don't be opening cards right before those major purchases, or you may have issues getting approved for loans. So be very mindful of like the overall financial picture. But in doing so, I've maintained an excellent credit score, even with opening these cards, as long as you're going slow and patiently and doing it responsibly. It absolutely will not ruin your credit score. I was really nervous about that. I had been I raised in the Dave Ramsey generation of like credit is the devil, cash is king, you don't want to ruin your credit score, all this stuff. And I've kind of just like had to unlearn a lot of that to be able to kind of fully invest in the travel hacking space and reap the rewards of it. I will say I am the ultimate rule follower. I am doing everything by the book, above board. I thought this like did seem too good to be true. Because, flying for free, flying business class for, just the cost of taxes and fees seems impossible. But once you understand it a little bit better and you understand how it all works, it's totally possible. And it is the best feeling to sit in what is, maybe a $5,000 ticket for free or for next to free, basically.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. What do the credit card companies get out of offering all this stuff? Is it just like, I won't say the hope, but the probabilities that people don't pay off their cards in times, or just
So
getting a bunch of that's what it
that's
is?
exactly where they make the majority of their money from things like interest. And so they're profiting off of people who can't use the cards in a fiscally responsible way. So as long as you can, it's great. If you know you can't, do not touch any of this. It's not worth it. Absolutely do not get near it. You can ruin your credit score. You can get into a lot of debt and things like that if you're spending money you don't have and not paying it off on time and those kinds of things.
How
That
many?
being said, this
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
conversation is for those of us who can pay off cards on time, spend within our limits and things like that.
Yeah, if you can't pay for your card, I have a financial podcast. Go look them up. That's not what this is about.
Right.
About how many cards would you say was like the max you've ever had open at once, give or take?
So I would say that's probably around 8.
Okay.
Now that's also, I use a 2-player strategy, which basically just means that I open cards for myself and my husband strategically. Sometimes they're in his name, sometimes they're in my name, sometimes I add the other person as an authorized user, sometimes I don't. There's a lot of, I refer him to cards and then I get a referral bonus. There's a lot of things going on. So I count the total of the cards we have together as at 8 right now. And I would be willing to push that further in the future, but that's just kind of where we're comfortable at the moment. And also like sometimes that means like getting rid of some cards, like the Southwest one we just dropped, and kind of making room for other ones. I personally really like to have keeper cards in my wallet, meaning cards that I know that I will always earn more value than the cost of the annual fee. So for example, like I don't encourage a lot of co-branded credit cards, but the Hyatt co-branded credit card is a great one because it offers a 1 annual free night certificate for holding the card, and there's a $99 annual fee. That free night certificate is for a category 1 through 4 Hyatt, and you can definitely get more than $99 of value out of that free night certificate. So right away, it pays for itself with the free night as long as you stay at one category 1 through 4 Hyatt a year. So things like that. Same with other cards like the Amex Platinum has a really high annual fee. It scares a lot of people away from it. I want to say it's like $695 now, if I recall. And I get over $1,000 of benefits from it. It kind of, that card's a little bit like a coupon book. It's like, oh, it pays for my Hulu account and it pays for this and that. But if you're good at keeping track of all those credits that it includes, you can get way more value than the cost of the card, and it's worth keeping it year after year.
Do you have spreadsheets onto like at this time I need to purchase this and at this time I need to use this card for that? Are you that dialed in for these credit cards?
I have a lot of it in my head. I do have
Wow.
calendar reminders. A lot of things go on calendar cycles, either of a year from when you like open the card or calendar year. So for like the Amex Platinum, like a lot of the credits are based on the calendar year. So I have like a notification in June to use up this $50 Saks credit that you have to use by the end of June.
Yep.
And then same at the end of December. So there are I do have a couple calendar notifications, but honestly, with 8 cards for me, I'm able to keep a lot of it in my head. It's not that many. If I had 20 cards, I would need to start writing a lot more stuff down. But at 8, it's a threshold that I can keep it mentally mostly. I also have like labeled all of my husband's credit cards so that he knows where to use each one. Like his Amex Gold says like restaurants and groceries, and Amex Platinum says like airlines and things like that. So he knows exactly when to swipe each card.
Smart, real smart. There's a lot of people are probably like listening to this, like, oh my God, it sounds like a lot of work. It's worth it. It is so worth it. The places you've been in the world, the places I've seen in the world, completely worth it. Here's a question I'm dying to ask. Um, okay, so when you sign up for a credit card, you get like the bonus points.
Mhm.
Anybody signs up for a travel card, you get X amount of points to use for travel, airline, whatever you want to use it for. And let's just say you burn it. You're done. You used it on a trip. You're down to like 1,000 points when you had 100,000. Is that card worth keeping around? Like, what do you do? Because I'm at that place right now with one of my Chase cards. We'll get into details and all this stuff in a little bit. But my wife and I burned it. We went to Banff, stayed at the Fairmont, which is like the greatest thing we ever did. That was freaking awesome.
That's on my
Absolutely
bucket
loved
list.
it. Oh my God. We can talk about that. So we did that and we're like, hey, this is why we stayed up these points. Let's use it. We used it. I still have the card, but I'm like, God, I got no freaking points on here. I used the this huge, gigantic amount of points you get when you sign up. What do you do when you come into that situation?
So I think it very much depends on the card and the person. With like, for example, like there are cards that will earn you like 4 or 5x points on gas. I almost never have to fill up my gas tank here in Chicago. So personally, gas rewards are like useless to me. So if it was a card like that, I would maybe consider closing it after. I wouldn't close any card before a year. Hold every card for at least a year and then close it. That way you don't risk the bank clawing back their sign up bonus from you and charging you for those points,
Ooh,
because you don't want that to happen. It also depends with a card, like with a Chase card. I'm not sure which one you have, but the Chase cards that allow you to earn points, the Sapphire cards, for
yep,
example, can
yep.
be paired with other cards that normally would earn cash back. But if you also hold one of these Sapphire cards, now that cash back can be turned into points, making it more valuable. So there's a lot of there's a lot that goes into the decision to keep a card, kind of like what's the card's value beyond just whatever the sign up bonus was. Are you able to get credits for it? Are you able to, does it have bonus categories? Like I have the Chase Sapphire Reserve that earns 3x on travel. So every hotel stay, every parking lot, every train, whatever it is, 3x points minimum. And then like for airlines, I use the Amex Platinum, but every other travel purchase, a cruise, anything, it's on my Amex, or I'm sorry, Chase Sapphire Reserve. So that's a keeper card for me because I'm gaining so many points from my regular spending
Okay.
on travel. Like I am still spending cash on travel. So I make sure that it's earning me more points to then redeem later. So there's a lot that goes into it, whether both of the card itself and the value it holds in your wallet with the other cards you have. So hard to answer like this one specific question for you, but that's also why like when I look at what cards to open, I generally go for keeper cards that I am pretty sure I'm going to want to hold for multiple years, based on my current strategy. That way I'm not having to play this guessing game all the time of like, should I keep it, should I not, am I wasting my money paying an annual fee, am I getting the value out of it? Because I've kind of like done that math before I ever decided to open it, with some exceptions. There are cards that I've done that with, but I would say like for the vast majority of people getting into it, start with the keeper cards.
Okay. So full disclosure, it was the Chase Sapphire Preferred, which is kind of like the second tier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm curious to get your take on this. What is the number one travel card for you?
So for me is the very important part of that sentence, because there is no one perfect travel credit card for any one person, like for everyone. Otherwise, we'd all have the same exact card in our wallet. And while there's a lot of overlap, not everybody has all the same cards. I would say my no-brainer card of like, yes, I would open this no matter who I was, no matter what I was doing, whether no matter how much I was traveling or not traveling. If I just wanted to travel one day, I would probably say the Capital One Venture X, because the card pays for itself right off the bat. It has I don't want to misspeak, but I want to say it's a $400 annual fee, and it has a
395. I have the
three.
card, so
Okay, great, perfect. 395. It has like a $300 annual like travel credit that you can use if you book through their portal, and book 1-2 hotel nights. That pretty much pays for it right there. And then if on the cardholder anniversary, you get 10,000 bonus points, which are worth at least $100 if you're valuing that at like 1 cent per point, which you can get more for value than that, but minimum $100 value. So right there, you add that up to 400. Card pays for itself. It earns 2 points on every purchase minimum, and then there's bonus categories as well. But the fact that every single purchase I make is going to earn at least 2 points per dollar is huge. And so you're able to rack up points very, very quickly with just your regular everyday spending. The one other card I will add to that caveat is if you're a renter, holding the Built card is a great thing to have in your wallet, because it's the only card that allows you to earn points on rent.
wow.
I unfortunately don't rent. It's like the one I almost wish I did just for this card and be able to earn these points, because it is a really unique program. And it also has like travel benefits. I want to say you also earn like 3x points on travel. It's a no annual fee card on top of that. The one big downside to it is there's no sign-up bonus. You pay no money, but there's no sign-up bonus. So you do have to kind of earn all your points from scratch. But if you're paying a decent amount in rent, it's earning points on money you have to spend no matter what.
So I've had numerous people on here to talk about travel, and each of them, whether on the podcast or a conversation afterwards or whatever, they've all said the Venture X. They all have the Venture X card, which led me and my wife to getting it, I think about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. That is the card that we mostly use for everything because of how fast you can accrue points, and we are just letting them accrue. One of these days, we may be taking a trip to Bora Bora or something like that crazy. So we're just gonna keep racking them up. But like I said, we used the Chase Sapphire to spend and splurge just last year. But I think what people don't realize is not only do you get your money back, like you just kind of said, how it costs $400, you get $300 in travel. You got to book it through their portal, so you do get the money right back within like a few weeks. You get it right back. I think people don't realize the perks, the number of perks that come with these cards. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I want you to hit on this because I'm just going to rattle off a couple of them from what I can actually remember. Is if you are paying your cell phone bill, I believe with the Venture X, it covers cell phone insurance. You get like an upgrade with Hertz, like the President Circle or something like
Yeah,
that.
that one's ending at the end of the year, unfortunately. But
Oh, is
yeah,
it?
President
Damn
Circle.
you. Damn
I've been
you.
enjoying that perk while it lasts.
Oh, for real? Oh, that's awesome. And there's what's another one I'm thinking? You get free like
Priority
TSA
pass.
priority pat.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
TSA pre-check slash like the credit to cover global entry and
Yep.
pre-check. That's a huge one. The priority pass membership and access with the Venture X specifically to the Capital One lounges, which there's only 3 of them so far, but they're very nice, but they just need to expand their network. But the
Right.
priority pass lounges, there's over 1,000 of them worldwide. Outside of the US, they have a very strong foothold. I think I very much thought before the world of travel hacking that airport lounges were only a thing for really rich executives traveling for business, and that was it. And now it's rare that I go on a trip and don't hit up at least one airport lounge along the way.
I can't agree with you more. It's been an absolute game changer to have access to these lounges. I thought the same thing. I was like, well, that sounds cool. I'm not that cool, or I'm not on a business trip or whatever. But now that you get the priority pass with the Venture X, I don't know if there's any other card you get it with, But now
Yeah,
that you
they're
get it,
actually all of the major banks offer Priority Pass, but
okay,
it's their each bank also has their own programs. Like Amex has the Centurion lounges, Chase has their Sapphire lounges, and then Capital One has the Capital One lounges.
gotcha. But I will say, I now actually look for layovers with airports that have priority pass. And I actually look for longer layovers because it's like, I want to go sit down, I want to recharge, I want to get free food and drinks. The food and drinks are usually pretty decent. There's definitely some lounges that are like amazing. There's a few that's like, oh, whatever. But wow, what a game changer. Travel has changed for me now that I can get into these priority pass lounges with this
Absolutely.
food, and it saves you
When
so much money with food,
I
with
was just about to
airport
say,
food.
when you
Yeah.
factor in how much money you're not spending on food, that you would have to at the airport during a layover or whatever, that I kind of like mentally throw that into the, well, how much did I spend on the card, but how many lounges have I hit
Oh
up
yeah.
with this card, and how much money have I saved on food and drinks? Which, I mean, it's at least $20 to have a meal at an airport.
At
And so you do
least
that 4 or 5 times a year, that's already $100, that, goes a long way towards bumping down how much you're really paying for the card.
$20 is really generous too. And in the
True.
lounges, it's free coffee and free alcohol too. At least some of the ones I've been to. So those they get up there real fast. So
Yeah.
that's been a game changer for me and my wife. And now that we have a newborn, it's like even having access to these lounges, like we have to, if we have to change him or if he's crying, we need to feed him. Like what that's
And
going to
there's
be absolutely
family rooms
amazing.
in some of the lounges, like
Yep.
specifically for little kids. So that's really great.
It's a game changer, absolute game changer. So these lounges, like I kind of had the same thought process of you. It's like, oh, that sounds really cool, a little hinky swanky there or whatever. But it was like, yeah, now it's like absolute game changer for travel. Another thing I want to hit on too, real quick, is I know some of these cards have trip insurance, which has come into play. Maybe for you, it has for me when my wife and I were traveling, we rented a car, we were in Idaho, and some car just kicked up a rock in our windshield and pretty much spider cracked it all the way across. It was covered. It was absolutely
Yeah.
covered.
And on top of that, not only is it covered, but you don't have to pay, you can get out of paying that like mandatory car insurance that Hertz or whoever will charge you by saying like in the US, I don't think you actually have to show any proof, but in the UK, for example, we've rented a car in Scotland and had to have a printout from Chase that you just call them up and have them email it to you, basically just saying like, hey, this person is covered under our rental car insurance. And then they waive the, what can be like $15 to $20 a day fee. So if you're gone for a week, that saves you hundreds of dollars just in having travel insurance, not even having to use it.
Mhm. Yeah, so same thing. We went to Iceland for our honeymoon, and we were told to can't just decline insurance because we were booking it with a card. So we got to
Exactly.
decline the insurance. Amazing! It's just saving you money right there on top of everything. What else?
Exactly.
What else does travel insurance cover for people that don't really know? Like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so it can cover all sorts of things. So even if like you got to really dig into their terms and conditions. This goes for any travel insurance, not just the ones from credit cards, but any company's travel insurance. But even if you got sick and couldn't go on your trip, or say you were traveling, you and your wife were going on a trip and your kid got sick and you weren't even traveling with the kid, but now you have to stay home, that would be covered. It's an immediate family member being covered, even if they're not traveling. It also, I will say one thing it doesn't cover that I learned the hard way though is civil unrest. So had a trip planned to Peru in December of 2022, and in early December, there were all these riots. They had an attempted coup in the country. It was chaos. The train to Machu Picchu was shut down. Some of the airports were shut down. We ended up deciding like there's no way like we can do the trip that we wanted to do. And so 8 days out, we decided to pull the plug on it and cancel. I mean, really, we postponed the trip, but we couldn't get money back for our flights. I booked the flights through the Chase portal, which I don't actually recommend doing, but this was a little bit of a mistake. And I had to fight with American Airlines and Chase for over a week just to try to get a credit. Ultimately, they finally gave it to me, but they kept saying, civil unrest isn't covered, things like that. Acts of terrorism sometimes are not covered. So things you can't really prepare for in advance. but unfortunately like are a reality around the world depending on where you're going. So knowing those terms and conditions is very important to knowing like what you can claim. But ultimately, like I was able to get the money back. Like I was able to use it on a different trip. So it worked out, but it really taught me to read all of the fine print and to get there is supplemental travel insurance you can buy if you are worried that, say, a place you're going to is going to have civil unrest, a war, terror, whatever. You can also buy cancel for any reason insurance. It's very expensive, but if you think that might happen, it might be worth the money in the end,
So
depending on also how much you're spending on the trip.
that's a great point. So when you book a flight and it's always like, do you want to buy insurance for this? Are you sure? Like when
Oh,
you
I never
purchase
buy
it,
the
you just
insurance that
say no.
yeah. So when you flights are covered depending on the credit card you use. So I know for Amex, I believe you have to use you have to book a round trip ticket for their airline insurance to kick in. However, with Chase, you only have to buy a one-way ticket. So
Hmm.
depending on what you're doing, while Amex gives me 5x points per dollar on airlines and Chase only gives me 3, that extra insurance on a one-way ticket is kind of worth it for me to use Chase in that case. And then when I book round trip, I'll use Amex.
This is amazing. This is why people work with you. For real, because you know all this stuff. This is so awesome. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds just yet. I'm going to ask you more questions about cards and perks and details and all that kind of stuff. I want to hit on what we first started with while working. So
Yeah.
people talk to you and work with you while working because people are thinking, okay, like I'm going to use some of these points to go on some of these trips. I still need a job. I need to take my PTO. I still need to spend money on food and all that kind of stuff when I get there. How do you help others while working experience and travel the world?
Absolutely. I mean, it came from my own personal experience, having a limited number of vacation days, being very frustrated by my limited number of vacation days, and having an endless bucket list at the same time. And I really looked at my calendar and my vacation days. I was like, what can we do with this? And their answer is a lot more than you think. You can be a lot more creative. I think a lot of people, and I kind of had this thought as a kid growing up, to go to Europe, you have to go for a week or 2 weeks to make it worth it, to make it worth flying across an ocean. And in reality, you don't. In fact, last year for Memorial Day weekend, we spent 72 hours in Switzerland. That's the first time we've ever been, so far the only time we've ever been to Switzerland. And I mean, we did a canyon swing and paragliding, went to the top of the highest train station in Europe. I mean, we did a lot in 72 hours.
Wow.
So don't underestimate how much you can do in a short period of time. I'm very much as slow travel is very much a trend right now. That's great for those who can take that much time. I envy that, but fast travel works for a reason. You can hit a lot of things in a short period of time. And I have this mindset that like I can always go back. And there's no way. I mean, even if you stay in a place for a month, you probably won't hit everything depending on how big the place is. So, if you only have a week or a long weekend, I just treated the mindset like, how much can I do? And then like, what do I have in my mind to go back and do next time? So even like I was just in Washington, D.C. this weekend for 48 hours, and I've been 3 times before and I still found new things to do. I mean, that's an easy example because it's a
Hmm.
huge city with a lot of stuff to do, but there's always more that you can go back to next time. Don't think that like this is the only time in your life you'll ever get to go to a lot of places, because travel hacking really kind of opens the world up and you see just how easy it is to book a trip to Europe and things like that, especially if you happen to live near like a major hub. I am really lucky to live in Chicago. It's really easy to get to a lot of places from here. I think it's pretty easy to like, there's direct flights to Japan, there's direct flights to Europe, South America, that you can get a lot of places really quickly. And I oftentimes will go and start brainstorming trips from flightconnections.com, where I just type in a city like Chicago and see like, okay, where are all the direct flights from here? Like, where can I go? I also do a lot of weekend trips. And so just next month, I'm taking a trip up to Duluth, Minnesota. And that was born entirely out of me being like, where can I do a weekend trip? You know, leave Friday after work, come back Sunday night. Where's a direct flight from Chicago that leaves, you know, after 6 p.m. on Friday, or 7 p.m. on Friday. And then I also looked at like temperature bands for the US, and I was like, where can I go where I won't melt in August? And I found Duluth as like a perfect thing, which worked out well because I'm also trying to hit off 50 states and haven't been to Minnesota. So that one worked very, very well, but it's very much like, a lot of it is built off of Google Explore feature. If you just open up Google Flights Explore feature, later this year, I'm going to Easter Island for a long weekend, not using
Oh,
any
that's
PTO.
amazing. That
Yeah,
is
I'm
awesome.
really excited. And but it's not using any PTO. The one caveat there is I have the ability to work remotely, and my husband has the ability to work remotely. Um, so it's a 6-night trip, but we're only in Easter Island for 2 nights. The rest is kind of transiting all the way down to South America and back up. But finding red-eye flights so that you can work during the day, finding co-working spaces in cities, or just working from a hotel, like researching the Wi-Fi situations. Like, it's a lot of those type of things that are turning through my brain when I'm planning a trip. When we go to Europe, sometimes we'll work remotely from 4 to midnight, because that's 9 to 5 in Central Time hours here in Chicago. So that works really, really well. We wake up around 8, explore from 8 to 4, work from 4 to midnight, sleep from midnight to 8, and kind of just repeat that all week. It does get a little exhausting, but that's why it's a short period of time, like 1 week at a time. I don't think I could maintain that for months on end.
Oh, this is awesome. I love this. We're on the same level here. Just kind of want to reiterate, like, stop like waiting, like getting one of these cards. Honestly, like you said, it's not for everybody, but it is so fun to kind of just see the points pile up. You're like, where can I go with this? It encourages you to actually like look to see where you can go and what you can
Look to
experience.
go, and then pull the trigger is the other part of it. Use
Yeah.
the points. Don't just let them sit endlessly, because points do get devalued. You know, a flight that once was 50,000 points in business class to go to Europe could now be 70,000, and so now you takes more points because you didn't book it earlier. Also, award availability is limited. So while you could book every single seat on the plane in cash, you can usually only book a handful of seats with points. There's exceptions to that, like Southwest, but largely, like, for example, like if there's 20 seats in business class, maybe 4 are available to be booked on points. So you want to book early so that those aren't taken by other people. For business class especially, I always recommend trying to book when flights are released about 11 months out, or if you're really flexible, last minute. But if you're working a corporate job, if you have PTO, you're probably not able to just drop everything really last minute. And so that's why I recommend booking really, really early.
I gotta ask you. So when it comes to Easter Island, I actually looked into going there. I don't know why I want to go there, but I want to go there. You have to go to Chile, right? Is that where you can leave
Yeah,
from?
the only flight right now is from Santiago to Easter Island. There used to be one from Tahiti, but they stopped that route during COVID.
Okay. And so what made you want to go there? Did you just open the map? You're like, I fit, let's just go.
I mean, Easter Island's always one of those places in the back of my mind, like that would be cool, but like who knows if I'd ever go to it. And then I was opening Google Flights Explore feature. I was looking for, we had a long weekend. I was like, okay, like where's a good place we could go with it? And I just started playing, and I saw it pop up on the flights, and I was like, haha, like, could I actually do that? And then the more I like figured out all the logistical details, the more everything fell into place. And I was like, we're booking it. Like we're just
Awesome.
pulling the trigger on it. So definitely don't be afraid of like crazy ideas. I think I literally had Banff as an idea for that long weekend, and we swung from Banff to Easter Island real hard, real fast.
Yeah, that's quite a swing. Banff would have been another amazing choice. We can talk about that if you'd like. I got some great tips. I've been there twice. It's one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. But
We'll definitely hit it at some point.
oh, I'm sure, of course you will. I'm not concerned about that. Talk about Google Flights Explorer. I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, so it's basically a feature where you can type in, I want to say like, you can type in just one airport, like Chicago, like kind of like flightconnections.com, and then it'll show you prices. You can also say, I want to go for a week in maybe this month or something. It's a little vague. The search terms are always a little bit vague. So you do have to kind of like narrow it down from there once you kind of have an idea. But it's great for if you're just like, where in the world could I go?
Amazing.
I opened Google Flights Explorer. In fact, when we canceled that Peru trip 8 days out, I opened Google Flights Explorer and found premium economy seats to Japan that were going for less than economy seats were at the time. And we just booked a trip to Japan 8 days out because of we just saw it on Google Flights Explorer. You know, it was even peak. It was the week of Christmas. The flights were not unreasonable somehow. So we just jumped on it. And I would have never guessed that we would have ended up there had I not opened up Google Flights Explorer and just looked, just saw what was possible. You never really know like what are options for you. I also would really encourage people to look into positioning flights, which is basically like if I live in Chicago, maybe the best flight either on points or cash is to fly out of New York or San Francisco or some other airport somewhere. And basically you take a positioning flight, just like hop from Chicago to New York, and then go from there. So in fact, for Easter Island, we're flying Chicago, New York, and then the next night taking a flight from New York down to Santiago. So it just kind of working it. There is no direct flight to Santiago from Chicago, but there's one to New York. Just kind of playing with it. You can really do a lot more than meets the eye on first glance.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm going to do that. I had no idea that existed. So you just taught me something new. One thing I want to ask you in your experience is, okay, so I'm someone who I've been on a plane triple digit times, and for the most part, I'm economy or coach, whatever it is. Um, is it worth the upgrade to business or first? And because you see just a gigantic difference in price or points cost, and it's like 800 more dollars just to move up a few seats. I'll get there at the same time. You know what I mean? So I never really pull the trigger on first class or just upping what I want to pay to go sit somewhere else. Is it worth it? What is your experience with that? And like what's your favorite airline or some of your favorite airlines?
Yeah, so I would say in the past year or so, I've flown about, I want to say in the range of like a dozen different airlines business class products. And generally, I would say personally, yes, I like would do an upgrade. However, not just, I'm not endlessly wealthy here. Like there is limits on like what I consider the value of it. For example, I also have only paid cash in two situations for business class seats. One is upgrading from economy with a bid system. So flying TAP Air Portugal, I've booked economy seats, and then you can bid for an upgrade if there's seats available. And then they go like, highest bidder wins, however many seats there are all the way down. That I have put in bids close to like $800 to get it from Chicago to Portugal. Part of it really depends on the trip too. So part of my fast travel strategy is like I hit the ground running when I go somewhere. So to be able to be well rested is huge. And I do sleep significantly better in a lie flat seat than in economy. So my day is able to go smoother. I'm able to get over the jet lag faster. So it kind of depends like what the whole trip is. If you have a day to like be tired, be lazy, drink a lot of coffee, just sit around and be exhausted, like then economy is fine. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like you kind of got to use it where it makes sense. I will say the price of business class tickets goes dramatically, even within the same airline. Like Air France will charge 50,000 points for a ticket, and then they'll for another flight they'll charge 400,000 points for a business class ticket of the
Mhm.
same length. I would never pay 400,000 points for a business class flight. However, 50 to 100, I'm going to take it almost every single time. There's also some nuances. The same flight can often be booked through multiple airlines if they're partners with each other. And some airlines charge fuel surcharges. So the taxes and fees that have to pay on top of the points can vary a lot. For example, Virgin Atlantic, they often have really low rates for business class seats, like 60,000 points or something like that. However, sometimes they'll be like over $1,000 or close to $1,000 in taxes and fees because of the fuel surcharges, especially if you're going through London. Heathrow charges really, really high surcharges just for flying through that airport. So you also may want, if you're flying to Europe, it may, say you want to go to London, maybe you fly to Paris and take the Eurostar over because it's a lot cheaper. The taxes aren't as high. There's ways to work around that. I would say the other time I've booked business class in cash was because there was like a sale going on. I had booked an economy fare to fly down to Peru, and that same flight in business class went down to only be like $300 more than economy. And I had booked refundable economy. So I just canceled the economy and booked the business class seat because it was such a small difference. I will say for that one, I subscribe to a couple of flight alert services that will email me when there's deals either in cash or points to all different places around the world. So the price of those services is usually worth it to me because if I book one deal a year through them, I've paid for the subscription with the amount I've saved.
Amazing. You are an
But I
absolute
didn't
wealth of
answer your
knowledge.
question. But to answer your question on my favorite business class I've flown is probably EVA Air. We flew them from SFO to Taipei and then Taipei down to Singapore. And it was the most like best food I've had, best level of service. The seats weren't the newest seats I've sat in, but they were extremely comfortable. And the amenity kit was like a designer brand. I want to say like Bulgari or something like that. I can't remember the brand, but it was just like top of the line all across the board. And I loved how long of a flight it was. The longer the flight, the more I want to be in business class. So to fly over the Pacific Ocean, I want to be in business class every single time.
Yeah.
In fact, like I haven't had to fly economy over the Pacific Ocean, and I'm hoping I never do because points and miles like have allowed me to figure out how to at least do premium economy. I will say premium economy is also to me a pretty big step up from economy, but not hugely more expensive. So that's kind of a good middle ground. I find the seats a lot more comfortable, and I can sleep decently comfortably in them.
What about favorite airlines for domestic? I know this is kind of like a hot topic. Everyone has their own favorites. What's your favorite airline or two?
Yeah. So for years, when I had that companion pass, I would have said Southwest, Southwest, Southwest. However, when you don't have status with Southwest anymore and you are likely to get like a C boarding group, it's hard to say them. They have a good network. I think the answer really lies on where you live. For example, I know so many people who love Delta. They are big Delta fans. They will die for Delta. And I've flown Delta once in the past 8 years.
Wow.
It's not usually even an option, nor do I seek it out because I live in Chicago and it's not a hub. If you live in Minneapolis, for example, you're probably flying Delta a lot. Atlanta, you're probably flying Delta a lot. Living in Chicago, it's a United hub. It's where United is headquartered. That's where I put a lot of my effort towards status. But then I also do split my efforts and also try to get status on American Airlines as well. So I kind of play both of those pretty equally.
Okay. I got to ask you a question. How are you accruing all these points? Because like I said, like when I sign up for the credit card, you get the mass 80,000 points or whatever it is, and then you blow it. And I'd be blowing it to a trip to Japan. If I got first class or whatever to Japan, it's gone. How are you
Yeah.
flying like all these other places? Like where are all the other points coming from? So obviously you're not spending $100,000 a month on other things to get more. So how are you getting these
Right.
points?
So sign-up bonuses are a huge portion of it. I definitely at one point had about 1 million points sitting across different accounts. And I don't really recommend sitting on a ton of points, but we then quickly burned them all down and booked a lot of things. So then now we're not sitting nearly as well. But sign-up bonuses are a huge portion of that. Referral bonuses, like I mentioned earlier with player 2 specifically, like if I'm referring my husband to a credit card that I have, I might get 25 or 40,000 or however many thousands of points just for him using my link. I've had a couple of friends use my link. I wouldn't say that's like the way I get a lot of points, but I have gotten some here and there. The spending categories are a big one. So if I'm booking $1,000 in flights, that now becomes 5,000 points with my Amex Platinum. So being anything with a bonus category is huge. And then shopping portals are huge. So shopping portals are a really, really big part of it. Rakuten, if you have an Amex card, your Rakuten, instead of earning cash back, you earn Amex points. So every quarter, however much shopping you've done through Rakuten, they convert the points or the dollars into points and send it straight over to your Amex account. That's been a really lucrative one, as well as I focus on the American Airlines shopping portal as well, because that one, the points you earn The American Airlines points count towards status. So then I'm also working towards status while I'm just online shopping for clothes or whatever. So that's like a really key part. Big life changes, expenses, things like that are great opportunities. If you need a new roof, if you're getting married, if you're having a kid, like these are all like really, if you're moving somewhere, these are all times you're spending a lot of money. Put that to work by, say normally you would never be able to hit $10,000 sign up, minimum spend for a sign up bonus. But now you need a new roof and you're going to have to spend 20,000. Great. Like you just hit a sign up bonus right there. So if you're, I honestly think of like bad things happening in my home. Like I just had water damage and I was like, this is the worst. And then I quickly was like, okay, it's not that bad because
It's a trip to Europe.
my insurance covered, like my homeowner's insurance covered the water damage, and I get to put all the money spent on my credit card to hit a sign up bonus and pay for a trip to Europe. So it's a hassle, but it's also a free trip.
Something that I will occasionally do is like when we go out with like groups of friends or Christmas is coming around or something like that. It's like, here, use my card, just pay me back.
Absolutely. That's like the one downside I've gotten all my friends into this game is that now they don't want me to just like pay for dinner and then have them Venmo me. But if none of your friends are into travel hacking and credit cards and all that, then it is a great game to front the money for various things. Absolutely.
That's amazing. Okay, so just for one moment, so going back to business class, first class, you think it is for the most part worth the upgrade, assuming it's semi-reasonable, right?
I think length of flight is a big one for me. So like domestically, it would have to be like Boston to Los Angeles or some flight to Hawaii for me to justify paying for or even using points on anything other than economy. So length of flight is worth it. But once you hit, these 8-hour overnight flights and I really focus on the overnights, the red eyes being lay flat in business class or first class, because I'm looking to sleep. I'm looking to maximize my sleep so that I can maximize my trip the next day. On the way back, I'll usually fly economy home from Europe because those are daytime flights and I'm home and I can be tired and it's kind of not as important once I'm home. But that's also because, so I pick and choose. I don't fly business class every single time. I don't have enough points for that. But that's kind of where you can finagle it, where it's like, okay, it's worth it to me on the red eyes. And then on the daytime flights, I'll suck it up in economy.
Smart. Love the strategy behind this. Love the strategy behind everything. I'm going to ask you a semi-selfish question because I want to know this, but I'm sure my listeners want to know this as well. We talked about the Venture X or just an overall travel card that covers rental cars, airfare, hotels, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to hotels, I don't really have a card when it comes to hotels. I don't really necessarily have a favorite. Do you have a favorite card when it comes to having a card and racking up points for places to stay?
So yes and no. When I started out and really up until this year, I would say I had no hotel loyalty. I really stuck to the American big three, Hilton, Hyatt, and Marriott, because between them, there is almost always a hotel anywhere you're going in the world. And it made it really easy. Like I just had loyalty points across all three. If I had enough points for a hotel, I'd use it. This year, I've transitioned a lot more focus towards Hyatt because their points are way more valuable. And they're a transfer partner with Chase. So I can use my Chase points to book Hyatt hotels and easily get 2 cents or more per point in value, which I mean, you're getting like half a cent in point at Hilton, for example, like you're at most of the properties. So Hyatt is a lot easier to get really great value out of. They have a smaller global footprint. You're not going to find as many properties. However, they're expanding all the time and they exist in most major cities everywhere you go. And in the US, they're everywhere. For example, I was able to go in earlier this year, I want to say March, to the Alila Ventana Big Sur, which is a Hyatt property. It's actually an all-inclusive adult-only property in Big Sur that we paid for entirely in points. And it goes for over $2,000 a night in cash.
What, a night?
And we got $2,000 a night. It is, I don't think it's worth it to pay cash, but for the points price, it was totally worth it. We had an amazing time. It's an amazing property. I think $2,000 a night's a little steep, but with points, absolute, like that, there's a reason, like that's one of the properties that people in the points and miles community, like they look at as like, these are the great redemptions. Like these are the places, if you're just looking at like, where's a great place to use my points, like that's a great example.
What card did you use to book that Big Sur Hyatt trip?
So I used the points from my Chase Sapphire Reserve card,
Reserve.
transferred to Hyatt. I transferred the points to Hyatt and booked directly with Hyatt.
So can I assume you would recommend the Chase Sapphire Reserve as well? I mean, I know that kind of goes neck and neck with the Venture X from what a lot of what I've read. So you have both of them.
So I have all like I have the Amex Platinum, the Chase Sapphire Reserve, and the Capital One Venture X. There is a place in my wallet for all three of them. It really depends on your spending habits. Like I know I'm spending enough on travel to justify that extra 1 point per dollar on everything, for all the travel related purchases. So you really kind of got to look at your personal wallet. However, Chase has better transfer partners in my opinion than Capital One. Capital One has a lot of great ones, but you're not going to get Hyatt, which is really, really key reason why a lot of people like having Chase cards in their wallet. Also, if you're a big Southwest flyer or United, you can transfer both of those from Chase, but not Capital One, also not from Amex.
So if I am looking to get a card that's more related to places to stay, like hotels, like a Hyatt or something like that, would you recommend an overall arching card like a Chase Reserve, or would you recommend a more focused hotel card only?
I would start with the bigger, more broad ones and then add the hotel cards if it makes sense. Like, yes, the Hyatt one kind of pays for itself with that one annual free night, but you're limited to only using the points on Hyatt properties versus those Chase points are more flexible. You can use them on flights if you need to. You can use them on Hyatt properties. You want to have maximum flexibility with your points. So, a Hyatt point earned on a Hyatt card is worth the same amount as a Chase point transferred to Hyatt.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter. Once it's transferred to Hyatt, those 2 points are identical, whether you used a Hyatt card to get it or a Chase card to get it.
Are there more hacks that you use for collecting points that we haven't touched on yet? I want to make sure we're touching on all of them.
Those are definitely the biggest ones I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, it really comes down to thinking about every transaction that you're making, whether it's gum at the grocery store or a big trip or whatever it is, thinking about like, okay, like how can I be earning more points? Like, am I using the right card? Half the time it's just swiping the right card in your wallet. Because if you're not doing that, if you're not paying attention, you're just missing points. Same with like using those shopping portals. If you forget it exists and don't buy with it, you've already missed out on however many points you could have gotten just because you didn't go through those steps. So I always make sure that I'm really like, every time I'm spending, I'm taking a second and putting myself in the mindset of like, okay, how can I maximize this purchase? Because then you don't want to be making purchases you weren't planning to make anyway, because that's just bad fiscal responsibility. If you're spending money you weren't going to spend to begin with. Like if you're buying things just to hit a sign-up bonus, that's not good. You don't want to be doing that. You want to make sure that these are all, things you're going to be spending money on to begin with, but then maximizing your purchases. And it's different for everybody. If you spend a lot on travel, that's going to look really different than somebody who spends a lot on childcare. Like if that's where their spending is and they don't, those things aren't going to code as travel. So you're going to have to use different cards. You're going to have to use different things. You might be using a lot more shopping portals if you have a kid because you're buying a lot more whatever products than if you're buying flights and things like that aren't on shopping portals.
Nice. Love it. And something I know you had mentioned to me that you would love to mention is I have it written down here. So a lot of points and miles deals are great if you can travel last minute or midweek, but it doesn't work well for most people. So I want you to speak to the strategies behind that.
Yeah. So constantly I see deals that are like, if you can fly on a Tuesday in October, like I have a great deal for you to fly to London or whatever. And it's, most people can't just drop everything, and it's not a good use of your PTO to go from like Tuesday to Sunday. Like it's better to work it around a holiday, to go for the use both weekends, get 9 days for 5 PTO days, that kind of thing. So if you're constrained by things like PTO, things like school schedules, those kinds of things, planning ahead is key. First of all, like I look about a year out, like I've already booked a trip for next June in 2025. I'm already thinking about a year out because flights release 11 months out. So I know like, okay, if I'm going somewhere and I want to book it on flights with points, especially business class, I'm looking early. There are flights that will go places on, Friday nights or Saturdays when you want to fly, return home Sunday night kind of thing. You just have to do a little more digging. It's not quite as obvious as like the Tuesday flight, because the airlines want you to take those Tuesday flights because nobody is. Like I understand the logic, but you can still do it, really finessing the time. And that's where being creative on where you're going. If you have flexibility of destinations, if you're like, we just want to go somewhere in Europe, great. There's like 40 countries or something. Like
Mhm.
use a lot of options on how you can get there. There's a lot of airlines, there's a lot of cities you can fly to. So being flexible is great if you can with destinations, but even if you're like, we're dead set on going to Paris next summer, I would, looking early is key, and really focusing on all those little variables you can control in your searches, like cities, times of day. If you're flying business class, making sure you're selecting for those things, award tickets, all those kinds of things.
So you just mentioned you booked a flight a year in advance. I got to ask the question. I think everybody wants to know this. When's the best time to buy a flight?
11 months in advance. Well, so every airline releases them a little bit off schedule. Like some of them are 362 days out from the day of the flight. Some of them are 340 days out. It's roughly 11 months, I would say, for most airlines. You can look up whatever airline you're looking for, how many days out they release their schedule. For award seats, as soon as possible, because they will go, like people will
Mhm.
book them and there's a limited supply. That's not the same for cash seats. I wouldn't say that they're the cheapest 11 months out. However, if you're booking something like Southwest, which I should also say, Southwest doesn't release their flights 11 months out. They release a lot closer in. I want to say they released their flights for January only in like April of this year. So like 9 months out.
Okay.
But for Southwest, you can reprice your tickets so easily. So if you do buy a $400 flight and it goes down to $200, it's super easy to get at least a travel credit back or cash, depending on what ticket you booked. And so I just like keep a stock of, I will constantly run the same searches on Southwest of flights I've already booked to see if they've dropped. You can also use a Google Flights alert feature, and it'll email you. I don't think it's quite as good as or as quick at emailing you as doing the searches on your own, but it'll alert you if the price drops, and you can go just do it online on the app or call Southwest and they'll reprice it for you, no problem. Other airlines will do the same, but it varies across like the type of ticket you book and things like that. Southwest makes it easy.
Love it. Okay. So do you have a newsletter? Yes or no? And do you get newsletters from anybody that gives you like kind of like alerts on travel?
Yeah, at this point, I don't have a regular newsletter. I have an email list, and I trying to get better about being more regular with it. But I do have an email list if people want to sign up. You can go to sign up for that on my website, maximizingmypto.com. However, there's a daily newsletter I love that is daily drops. Daily newsletter. It's always about 5 minutes worth of reading every morning, and they send it Monday through Friday. And it's both like current travel hacking deals, because a lot of things in the travel space are time based. This deal ends tomorrow, this deal ends next week, this just got announced. You kind of have to keep up on a lot of news in the travel hacking space to take advantage of some things. So they keep on top of that, and also it's very beginner friendly. Like they will explain topics from beginner to advanced, that you may, if there's terms you don't know, there is a lot of lingo in this industry to learn to really understand what people are saying. Even like a positioning flight, like that's, not a term people use in the regular world.
Right.
So they do a great job, and it's 5-minute chunks, very digestible, free email list, daily drop. Can't recommend them enough.
So Daily Drop is the name of the newsletter.
Yeah, I believe their
Okay.
website is just dailydrop.com.
Okay. And I'm going to drop a question on you that I did not prepare you for, but I
Okay.
got to ask you, cruises. Do you have any advice or tips with cruises? Do you have any experience with cruises?
I have not taken a lot of cruises, especially not like a lot of big commercial, like Royal Caribbean, Princess. I've done one Royal Caribbean in college, and one Princess cruise to Alaska. Both were just booked in cash, nothing crazy. Like I didn't know what I was doing. No hacks there really. However, cruises, I've done more like specialty cruises. Like I went to Antarctica earlier this year.
Freaking what
That
the hell, man? I want to go there. That's not fair.
I can't recommend enough. Best trip I've ever taken. But that was obviously a very different type. You're not on a big ship. That ship had 150 people. And I did actually kind of travel hack that one a little bit in that, I went with Polar Latitudes, which was an amazing company. Couldn't recommend it enough. However, they partner with Swoop, who's a travel agency that books Antarctic cruises, not just with Polar Latitudes, but with lots of companies. And I reached out to Polar Latitudes to book the trip, and we're not going to charge a credit card fee to pay for the cruise. However, Swoop was trying to charge a 3% fee. The prices were the same, but that 3% fee adds a lot. Antarctica cruises are not cheap. So that 3% fee, I wanted to be earning points. Like I really didn't want to have to pay cash, a debit card and lose all the points. So I negotiated with Swoop. I said, hey, Polar Latitudes is going to allow me to pay with no credit card fee. Will you waive it? And they did. And that whole trip coded as travel with my Chase Sapphire Reserve. I earned 3x points on what was the most expensive trip of my life.
Mm,
And so it really went a long way to funding not only the flights for that trip, but like future trips as well.
that's amazing. I want to ask you about Antarctica in just a moment, but yeah, I kind of wanted to bring cruises to light because there's a lot of people that take cruises, they love cruises, they live on
There
cruises.
is a lot of ways to get free cruises. Even like there
Yeah.
are people who that's their bread and butter. I don't consider myself a cruise person, so it's not my bread and butter, but I know there are people who, if you status match, status matching is basically like if I have top tier status with one company, another company will match it. So there's ways, and I think some of these like have been closed, so things are ever changing, but there at least used to be ways to like status match to enough companies like and casino brands and things like that, and then you end up with a free cruise at the end of all these status matches. So there definitely are ways to hack it, and I have some friends who are really, really good at doing it, but I'm not one of those people.
Yeah, because I've logged into the Venture X portal a few times. You see cruises as part of the deal too. So it's like for the people that want to take cruises, it's actually part of
Yeah.
this as well. So yeah.
Virgin Voyages, which is an adult only cruise line, they do offer every year they'll do pretty good deals on their cruises where it's, I want to say like 70,000 points for a whole week for like 2 people in a cabin, and it's an all-inclusive cruise, so it's a great deal. And that one's way easier to book. It's, you just need Virgin points, which you can, if you have any of these major credit cards, they all transfer to Virgin. So it makes it really, really easy. But they only run that deal usually once a year.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to come out of left field a little bit with this question. Being a brand new dad, I can't assume you have kids or not. Do you have kids? You're shaking your head no. Okay.
Not yet, not yet.
But you've traveled a lot, so you've probably seen a lot of people with kids. Just from what you've seen or experienced or anything that would you have any tips or advice for me now that I'm going to be traveling with a little one? Is there anything you would recommend?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the travel hacking space, there are a lot of like companies that offer perks for traveling with kids. For example, Air France offers, I want to say it's like 20 or 25% discount on award flights. So if you have a 50,000 point ticket for an adult, it's 40,000 points for a kid. So there are, and that's like up to age 12, I believe. So there are like if you look for them, and sometimes they won't tell you about them. They're not going to be upfront and be like, hey, here you go. You have to kind of like Google for the companies that have it. And like, so if you are ever booking a flight, just Google like, are there any benefits for kids, with this airline? Because sometimes they don't make it as obvious. Or Hyatt, for example, I was just reading yesterday, somebody with kids posted that internationally, especially in Europe, it's really hard to get rooms that accommodate more than 3 people. So if you have multiple kids, you usually need a second room. And if Hyatt will offer like 50% off the price of a second room, if you have to book the first room and then like email them, and they'll usually accommodate that discount. So there's lots of like ways to get around that.
Oh, no kidding.
But yeah, but the travel insurance, I would say, is the biggest one that comes to mind when I think of kids. I think they get sick a lot, especially little kids. So that travel insurance, to know like, as much as it sucks to cancel a trip because your kid got sick, knowing that, or being on a trip and they're sick and you need to go to a doctor, and like knowing that's covered, can really put your mind at ease in a lot of ways.
Yeah, great tips. And so I'm going back in a month to Sedona, where my wife and I got married. We're staying at the Enchantment Resort. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Enchantment. Become familiar, because you got to put that on your list, because the place is
Okay.
absolutely incredible. We're going back, and now we're bringing the little one, and then place. So something we had to get used to doing is, any place we're going to stay at, is call them and say, hey, do you have like a playpen or whatever it
Yeah.
is? Because you can't really travel with that. So that's huge.
Right. Absolutely. Calling ahead's really big. I know. And this is kind of where, like, if you're using points and staying at maybe more luxurious properties, you maybe wouldn't pay for in cash. I've heard like that Four Seasons hotels, Ritz-Carlton hotels, like they are extra accommodating to kids often. I follow a couple parents who strategically seek out ways to stay at those kinds of hotels because they know like it's going to be easier from a parenting perspective.
Mhm.
Also, or like all-inclusive resorts that have kids clubs and daycares and those kinds of things, to allow the parents to like have some free time away from their kid, is also a strategy that I've seen some people do.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you another personal preference question. What value do you put in staying at like a really nice place? Because it sounds like you've stayed at some okay places, some amazing places. Like, what are your thoughts? Is it worth the value? Or are you like, I don't care. I just want to get there. I'm never in the hotel. I just want to experience the place. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, a lot like the business class seats, is it worth it question. It really is like an it depends. For example, when I was in DC this weekend, I did not stay in the hotel more than to shower and sleep. So I didn't put a lot of weight on where I stayed, outside of, I knew I wanted to stay at a Hyatt to keep earning towards status, but I didn't care, I didn't need a suite. I didn't want a suite. Like, it didn't matter. However, when there are places where the hotel is the destination, like the Alila Ventana Big Sur very much is the destination. It's this amazing property, that's worth using a lot of points for. So if I'm going to a city to sightsee, and I'm going to be out of the room all day, I want comfortable. I'm not going to stay in like a Motel 6, but I don't need a giant suite. I don't need the Ritz-Carlton. And I'll save those points and that money for where I think it's way more worth it, where I think that, like, for example, where the destination is the accommodation. So like, I really love staying in really unique accommodations that you happen to not be able to book on points. So when I was in Australia, we slept in the middle on a barge in the middle of the Great Barrier Reef
I
in a
saw
room that was
that.
underwater.
What the
Yeah, it was
hell?
so cool. I mean, our room was underwater in the middle of the ocean. Amazing. And then in Peru, we slept in these pods on the side of a cliff.
Yeah, so you can have
Um,
that. I don't want that.
but the point is, like, those were not inexpensive places to stay, and you had to book them in cash, and I was more than happy to do so. And then, on other parts of the same trip, we were just in a regular hotel room, because the room wasn't the destination. So if you're going to a resort where that's the destination, maybe it's worth upgrading to the ocean view room if you're in Hawaii or something, and you're going to be spending a lot of time there. But if you're just in and out, cheapest room in the hotel is just fine.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've basically lived my whole life, was kind of like, whatever, I'm never there. I will say, over the last couple of years, I've been fortunate enough, with whether with points or, financially doing okay, that we spent a little more. And a couple nights, sometimes like we'll go to a location for like maybe 4 or 5 days, and like two of the nights we'll stay at like an amazing place just to kind of like relax and enjoy it. And we went to Sun Valley, went to the Sun Valley Lodge, went to the Enchantment, and we like I said, went to the Fairmont and Banff using points on that. And now because of that, we booked a trip for the Fairmont in I think it's in Quebec, the one on the St. Lawrence River there. And it's just like once you get a taste of that amazing
Yeah,
little
it's hard to go back. Same with
experience.
business class seats. Once you lie flat, it's really hard to go back. I will say, like, I'm very much consider myself like a little bit of everything traveler. So, I'll do like in Switzerland, we stayed in a hostel. And then, over here, we're staying in like luxury accommodations. Like last week, I was on this luxury cruise in the Galapagos. Like, I'm really like all over the place with both like destinations and like the level of luxury or roughing it. Really depends on the destination. Every trip is unique and really needs to be like evaluated in that way.
If you don't mind, I want to put a loop on this. And then I kind of want to just touch on real quick a few of your experiences because you've been
Sounds
to some
great.
amazing, crazy places. All right. So I'm going to tie up this part of the podcast. And for the people that are still with us, still listening, and they're like, I don't know if I can pull the trigger on these credit cards. What's the catch? I still just I don't believe it. Perhaps they grew up in that Dave Ramsey era of like, don't have any credit, all that kind of stuff. I do know those people. What do you have to say? What's your advice?
I would say start slow. Like you do not need and shouldn't open like 6 credit cards in a year. Start with one. Get comfortable using one. Get comfortable knowing the ins and outs of the perks, the spending bonus categories, how to transfer points and redeem points. Get comfortable with one card. And then once you know that card really well, start to see what would complement that card. What you feel, where are the holes in your wallet, like based on your spending and your desires. So start slow, especially if you're skeptical. There's no need to go 100 miles an hour. You can, even if you only book one flight on points, that's so much better than paying cash
Mhm.
for that same flight. Every, time you book on points, you win. Like you beat the banks and you win. You play their game, you come out ahead. So it doesn't have to be 50 business class flights around the world in a year. Like that's insane. It can just be maybe you're visiting your parents across the country on points, and weren't going to be able to take the trip otherwise. Like that's a huge win, especially if the difference is not traveling or taking a trip. Like that's a much bigger difference than like economy to business class. Like that jump from not traveling to traveling is so big. So, even if you're still in economy, like, and that's all you'll ever do, totally fine. That's still a huge win.
Mhm. And so correct me if I'm wrong. If you pay off your card on time and you actually travel perhaps once a year, there is no catch, right?
Yeah.
There is no catch.
Yeah. I mean, at this time, things can change. Unfortunately, there are bills out in Congress by some senators who would like to change the rules around credit cards that wouldn't directly get rid of credit card points, but indirectly might cause the banks to make decisions because they may not be as profitable anymore. Um, Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully these bills don't pass. They've also been out in Congress like for over a year now and have really not
Mhm.
moved. So who knows how long it'll take them to move if they ever go anywhere. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of potentially bad things in the future, but so I'm taking advantage of it all right now because say credit card rewards cease to exist, like at least I took all of these trips now. Like at least I earned all these points, took all these trips while I could.
Is there a possibility, you may not know this, is there a possibility that your points just vanish if you don't use them? Or if it's like, hey, if you got them, you got them, but we're not doing this any further?
Are you saying in terms of the bill and the terms of the banks changing the
Correct.
rules? I
Mhm.
don't think that they will vanish the points. I think they will do a much more gradual system, maybe like stop allowing you to open certain new cards, lower the sign up bonuses or get rid of sign up bonuses. Basically kind of like let you I'm guessing they'll let you use the points you have, but really make it hard to earn more points.
Okay.
That would be my guess. I will also throw out if you have points in airline accounts, make sure they're not expiring. For example, American Airlines, like they expire after 2 years of inactivity. If you haven't taken an American Airlines flight in 2 years, if you haven't purchased anything through their shopping portal, used their credit card, anything like that, they will expire. So just like keep an eye on that, because it's really easy to make a purchase through a shopping portal and keep all your points, reset that 2 year date to 2 years from the date of purchase. So just make sure you're not just letting points disappear because you weren't paying attention. That would be horrible.
Great point. Okay, as I said, we're gonna wrap that up. Is there anything else on that you want to hit on that we did not touch on?
I think it's a huge topic. Travel hacking is, to even try to talk about it all
Right.
in an hour or so is impossible.
We'll come back on and we'll
Hopefully,
keep hitting on it.
hopefully this gives a good overview for people looking to get into the space who are interested, but maybe haven't pulled the trigger on their first card yet.
Okay, amazing. That itself is amazing. And I do want to talk about a couple of things that looked freaking incredible on your website, maximizing my PTO. So I had watched both seasons of Down to Earth with Zac Efron and Darren O'Lean, and I saw the last season they were in Australia, and one of the episodes they stayed in the Great Barrier Reef underwater in a hotel. Basically, their bed is just in the ocean, and I saw you did that. I'm like, hold on, time out, time out. I got to ask her about this. What the hell? So you flew to Australia and you stayed in the ocean, correct?
Yeah, so this was part of like a 2 week trip we did that was Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. So we just powered through 3 countries really, really fast. But part of that, like I knew, like big bucket list item was seeing the Great Barrier Reef. I think that's on a lot of people's lists. And I found this place that is owned by Cruise with Sundays, and it's a pontoon anchored to the Great Barrier Reef. And they offer a lot of day trips. Like that is their main form of business, is you can take a day trip. It's like 2 or 3 hours by boat. We left from Airlie Beach. From Airlie Beach out to the reef, about 3 hours. Then you can snorkel, you can scuba dive, you can do a helicopter flight. We did all of the above. And then you can either stay overnight or you can go back on the same day. So we chose to stay overnight. And then from there's 2 options. They have 2 underwater rooms that are just like full hotel rooms underwater, where you have a like giant glass floor to ceiling windows, and then a glass panel in the floor as well. So there's fish like going under you and past you. And then they also have a dozen or so day beds essentially up on the roof of the pontoon boat, where you can like kind of camp under the stars in these like day beds that zip up.
Oh,
And even that's a great option, but I knew I wanted to sleep underwater as soon as I learned about this. I was like, okay, how far out do you open bookings? Because I had booked the trip a year in advance, and you couldn't book this hotel room that far out. I don't think so. I had to wait and like put it on my calendar, and as soon the date, because they only have 2. So and I knew I only had one date that worked with my schedule to make it happen. So I was very picky. It was such an incredible experience. I mean, the food was crazy good. Like this was nice dining experience on a pontoon in the middle of the Great Barrier Reef. I had never scuba dived before, and they had an introductory dive where you did not need to be certified, and they like gave you all the gear, gave you instructions. A guide went with you and held your hand the whole time on your first dive. And then the second dive we did, they let go for a little bit, but you like stayed generally very close to them in case you needed help. I felt very, very safe. It was such an incredible experience. I also did my first helicopter ride, which was a like 5 or 10 minute flight over Heart Reef. So it's this reef shaped like a heart. Very cool to see from the air. And that's the only way to experience it. And then staying underwater at night, there's these blue lights they turn on, that attract these giant fish that are probably 2 to 3 feet long at least, that go by all night. Yeah, I really didn't want to go to sleep. That was a hard one to be like, I did need to sleep a little bit, but I could have watched those fish endlessly.
I have to ask you, I'm really curious. For one night, American dollars, how much does staying at a place like that cost?
I think it was roughly like $1,500 for the
Okay.
room. And then like scuba diving and the helicopter were extra on top of that, but like snorkeling was included and all of the snorkel gear and everything was included.
Okay. Wow. What a
And the
crazy.
transfer to and from Airlie Beach was part of that price, and the
Okay.
food. Everything
Okay.
everything was included basically.
Wow. It's just an amazing experience. And you said Antarctica was possibly even better.
Oh, Antarctica, I mean, I will, unless I go back to Antarctica, I'm never topping that trip. And even so, like the first time seeing it, like I don't even think going back would be able to top it. I mean, we camped one night on Antarctica, so like sleeping bags on the snow, like what, like it was
Were you
my husband's like,
freezing?
so I slept pretty comfortably. These are really highly rated sleeping bags that went down to -20 or something. It wasn't as cold as you think it is. We went in February, so there's summertime.
Okay.
And during the daytime, the temperatures were around like 33 to 36 degrees Fahrenheit most days. So I mean, honestly, warmer than I've skied in a lot colder
Tolerable.
conditions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like you're wearing, essentially the same clothes you would go skiing in. And then the sleeping bags were really well rated. And then we had a small like air pad that we had to blow up that was maybe an inch thick. And that really made all the difference between like the people who were freezing overnight and the
Uh,
people who were comfortable were the people whose air mats deflated. They were freezing
mm,
because the ice will penetrate through the sleeping bag, but with that little bit of air, it protects you from it. And I slept great. I had a great time. And truly like such an incredible experience. Did the polar plunge, which I was terrified for. Didn't sleep the night before. I was so terrified.
wow.
And then I jumped out, and as soon as I could breathe again, because I lost my breath doing it, as soon as I could breathe, I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. I would do another polar plunge again tomorrow. Like it was great.
Amazing. That's
And then we
amazing.
also kayaked as well, which was epic, and saw, I mean, penguins, obviously, whales, leopard seals, so many different seabirds. It was unbelievable.
Oh, so cool. So yeah, Antarctica's on my weird random list. I want to say Greenland's actually on my list too. I don't know
Oh,
why.
that one's
Well,
on my list. So after we came back from Antarctica, we were like, we kind of realized how much we love the polar regions, and
mhm.
we've never really been big beach people anyway. And we kind of realized, oh, we should just kind of go all the places that are like as far north and as far south as possible. So we just booked a cruise for next year to Svalbard, in the archipelago, like way up, the highest town in the world is up in Svalbard.
Well, so where's that located? Where is that?
So
I'm
it's
looking
owned
at
by
it.
Norway, but it's kind of like it's above Norway. You just like keep going up,
Oh
really,
wow.
really close to the North Pole, basically.
That's so freaking cool.
Yeah,
Kristen
so I'm
loves
excited
Chris.
for that.
I've dragged my wife to so many northern places. She's like, "Can we go tropical, please?" I'm like, I get where she's coming from, but yeah, that just sounds so freaking amazing. And like, isn't there some kind of like a reward to go where like nobody goes? Like when you get there,
Yeah,
you're like, I
I
am
think it
here and
is
no one
fun.
else is.
We do go to a lot of places that like are very touristy. Like I love Paris. Like it is one of my favorite cities. I could go back there endlessly. However, it is really fun to go to the little more off the beaten path. So that's why, and experience those like unique nature elements, like the animals you can only see
Mm.
in Antarctica. Svalbard, chance to see polar bears. I just got back from the Galapagos. Like, there's all sorts of unique animals there. And I've never really even considered myself like a nature person prior to a lot of these trips. And the more I've gotten to experience these, the more I like love it. And it makes me want to book more and more of these types of trips.
Oh, so cool. So what's like on your bucket list? So I know where you're going next year. Besides that trip, what's like on top of your bucket list?
A safari is still really high, like an
Uh,
African safari. Haven't done that yet. Probably will book one for like late next year. Kind of still, there's a lot of countries to choose from and a lot of different like times of year. Every time of year has different animals. Every country has different animals. There's some properties I'm like specifically interested in. I've heard a lot of great things about like the JW Marriott Masai Mara in Kenya. For example, the Giraffe Manor in Kenya, like those are kind of like bucket list properties. So I haven't narrowed it down enough to make any decisions, but hoping to do it at least my first safari. If I kind of open it like it's not where you want to go in the world, it's where do you want to go first.
Mm.
Because there's
Hmm.
always, just because you do a safari in Kenya doesn't mean you can't go back and do one in Tanzania a few years later or something like that.
Very true. Are you going to stay at are these points that you're using, or are you using points to get there, or then paying cash to stay there? How does that work?
Depends on the trip. Oftentimes we'll try to do especially for these long trips with long flights, try to book the flights in points. And then if we can book like the JW Marriott Masai Mara is possible to book in points. You do need quite a few Marriott points to do it, but it's possible. And so if we end up pursuing that, then we'll try to use points. But if we, like Giraffe Manor, for example, is a privately owned hotel, it's not part of a chain, you do have to pay cash there.
Mm.
So it kind of depends on the properties you're looking at, how feasible it is, the award availability. Sometimes like if we're like, we can only go this 1 week or something like that, and it's the week everybody else is trying to go, we may pay cash because there's no availability and we know we'll use our points somewhere else. Like the
Right.
points, we travel enough that we're never scared of not using our points.
This has been an amazing conversation. So glad we connected. There's no question I'm gonna be following you along your travels, asking you more questions, bothering you stuff. I'm gonna have you
Absolutely.
back
I'm an
on.
open book. That's exactly why I started maximizing my PTO, was just to like help people. I'm such an open book. I love traveling. I love talking about travel. I love helping people travel better and more often and for less money if possible. So I love, if somebody's in my DMs, I'm happy to answer any questions they have. Email me, DM me. I don't care. Like, I'm happy to help.
So, what is your email? What is your DM? What is your website? Say it all again.
Yeah. So on Instagram, I am at maximizing my PTO. My website is maximizingmypto.com. And then you can email me directly at jackie.swayze at maximizingmypto.com.
You rock. You're living the life you live once and you're doing it right. I absolutely love this. I love that you're helping other people do the same. And so, people, I can second everything you've said, most of everything you said. I will say I've been playing the credit card game as well. You got to do it. You got to join the game. If you can pay it off responsibly, there isn't a catch. You're missing out if you don't play the game right. So, Jackie, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love
Thank you
this.
so much for having me. This has been a great time.
Absolutely.